Welcome to the first stage of this new series of European journeys in which we will explore some of the lives of the Walloons that changed the world. The Walloons that changed the world. That's the new series, that's the title of this series. Walloons are in fact people who live in modern-day Wallonia, that is in the southern part of Belgium. And in the 16th and 17th century, these people had in fact adopted the Protestant Reformation, and because of that they were persecuted in what is today modern-day Belgium and also the north of France, and they had to flee from there, and they became a blessing for the lands where they settled. So for this first episode we are going to visit the city of Mons. The Flemish call it Bergen. It is located in the southwest of the country, not so far from the border with France. And the name Mons comes from the Latin, which means simply hill, and that's why it is called Bergen in Flemish. And it's in fact located on a hill. It was founded in the first millennium by a lady called Waldetrude, or Wodru. She was a nun who established a house of prayer there on top of that hill, and then bit by bit that house of prayer became a monastery, and several other monasteries came there, and finally what was first a house of prayer became a city. Now if we fast forward to the 16th century, that city of Mons was the place of the birth of in fact probably the most important figure of the Reformation in what was then called the Netherlands. Now the Netherlands today, we identify it to that nation which we can find on our maps obviously, but at the time it was, the Netherlands covered also modern day Belgium, Luxembourg, and the north of France. All of these lands were called Netherlands. So that's where one of the most prominent reformers of the Netherlands in fact was born. Now, the location we are going to visit is the location of an ancient monastery which belonged to the Order of the Beggars. It's an ancient order of the Roman Catholic Church. And today we can still see the building, one of the main buildings of that monastery, which belongs now to the authorities of the region of Wallonia. And that area is in fact the area where Guy de Brès was born. Now, if you go there, don't try to find any memorial to Guy de Brès, because there is absolutely no memorial there to this giant, not just of the Reformation, but even of the founding of the modern world, nothing less. So let's explore a bit who he was, and why can we claim such a thing about his life. Well, he was born there in that area in 1522. And that was a time in which the Reformation had already made huge inroads in the nation, in the country of Belgium, in what is today Belgium. Many people had adopted the Reformation, and that had led Charles V, the emperor, whose capital was in Brussels, to publish an edict, or placard, which would condemn anyone who was in possession of any writings from Martin Luther. And so that was the first time in the history that such a thing happened against the Protestants. It was the first place where it happened. It was in Belgium. And then when Guy de Brès was 1 year old in 1523, the first martyrs of the Reformation were in fact executed in Brussels. And so we understand a little bit the circumstances in which he was born. Now, we don't know if he was born in a family that had already adopted the Reformation, but it was a pious family. And so he grew up in a very pious Christian family. And when he was a young adult, he discovered the Bible. He most probably discovered the writings of Martin Luther. And he began to teach what he had learned to his friends. And so they gathered together in a hidden group, in a hidden Bible study group there in Mons. And obviously it was hidden because it was not allowed to gather and study the writings of Martin Luther, but that he did. the authorities would quickly discover that. And soon his brother would be arrested, Christophe de Brès, who was part of that group. And Guy understood that he was not safe in Mons anymore. And so he decided to flee, like many other Dutch at the time, fled modern-day Belgium and Netherlands to find refuge in England, in London. In London there was there a Dutch church, made mainly of French-speaking people, and Guy de Brès joined that church. It was at the time when the King of England was Edward VI. He had adopted the Reformation himself. But Edward would die very quickly, very soon after Guy de Brès' arrival. He died in 1553. And those who know the history of England will know that after Edward VI came the famous Bloody Mary as Queen of England. And she was nicknamed Bloody because, in fact, she persecuted the reformers in England like none others had done and will do. So, again, the Dutch had to flee London, and this time they went to Germany, but not Guy de Brès. Guy de Brès returned to the Netherlands of the time, that is northern France. He went to Lille and also to Ghent in modern-day Belgium to strengthen the church. But he lacked the theological ground to do so. And at the same time, the authorities began to identify Guy de Brès as one of the leaders of the Reformation in Belgium and the main head to be caught. And so he had to flee again. He was not safe at all there. And so he went to Germany, to the French-speaking church of Frankfurt, which was encountering serious divisions inside the church. And that meant that even John Calvin himself had to come to Frankfurt to bring order into the church. That's when Guy de Brès most probably met John Calvin. The first time he met him, that is. And Guy de Brès followed John Calvin back to modern-day Switzerland, and he went to Lausanne to study at the feet of Pierre Viret in the Academy of Lausanne. Pierre Viret is another major reformer in Switzerland. And after that, he moved to Geneva, where he would study at the feet of John Calvin. So there he graduated, he had his master's in theology, and returned to modern-day Belgium, where he settled in Tournai. Tournai became, in fact, the Geneva of the North, or the Flemish Geneva, as it was called, because Flanders at the time covered modern-day East Flanders, West Flanders, and also Hainaut was part of that land. And so it was the Geneva of the North. And that's where Guy de Brès wrote the Confession of Faith, la Confession de foi in French. And that would become the Belgic Confession, which is still adopted by some denominations. The Dutch Reformed Church, but also the Dutch Reformed Church in America, still has the Belgic Confession as its founding document. Now, Guy de Brès was still pursued by the authorities. They still sought to arrest him, so he had to flee once more. And this time he went to a small principality called Sedan. It is located in modern France today. It's at the border with Belgium, where the prince had adopted the Reformation. So he was very happy to see Guy de Brès coming there, and he would then enforce the Reformation in the principality. But Guy de Brès remained connected with Belgium. He went back to strengthen the churches, to visit even those who had been arrested and waiting for their execution there in jail. So he took enormous risks. He went there incognito. He took enormous risks to visit his brothers and sisters in Belgium. He then moved to Antwerp, another capital of the Reformation at the time, and from there he returned to Tournai and finally was arrested and was transferred to Valenciennes, a city that is now in France, not so far from Mons, not near the border with Belgium. And there he was executed on the 31st of May, 1567. Now, this time, the time of his execution, coincides with the invasion of the Spanish armies, who were there sent by the son of Charles V, that was Philip II, who wanted to recover the whole lands, so Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, north of France, to Roman Catholicism. he will succeed partially. The land would be cut in two, and that's why today Belgium and Netherlands are separated. And nevertheless, during that time, many more Protestants would have to flee from modern-day Belgium and the north of France. I said that Guy de Brès is a key person for the birth of the modern world, because in fact, his confession of faith became the foundation for the Synod of Dort, which was a famous synod that gathered many Reformed people from across Europe, and the publication of the Canons of Dort out of that synod would become a sort of constitution for the new Dutch Republic, which was in fact a proto-nation as we understand it today, after especially the Treaty of Westphalia. The nations as we understand them today were born in fact through this new Dutch Republic, and that the constitution of that country in fact springs from this confession of faith. So we can say that Guy de Brès is a father of the modern world, and certainly of the modern Netherlands. As I said, if you visit Mons today, you will not find any memorial to Guy de Brès, and that is very sad, because he is a giant that ought to be remembered, in particular in the land where he was born and where he did so much for the Reformation. So I hope this podcast will help recover this forgotten figure, at least in Belgium. I'm Cedric Placentino. See you next week for another stage of European Journeys.